Hi, Cheryl from Garden in the Borough. I thought I'd talk today a little bit about what's going on in the garden here in June. And in June, we're all about roses and clematis around here. Over 100 clematis grow here, and most of them are in some form of bloom in June. And then I grow a lot of roses. I'm going to pause for a second to apologize for the audio. My mics just will not stay working today, and this is the only time I have to film, so I'm hoping the audio is going to be passable. Some of the footage I got yesterday, the mics were fine. Today, not so much. Anyway, back to roses and clematis. So I'm standing here in front of one of the roses I grow in the garden, and I want to talk about this type of rose before we move into some of the roses that are blooming with clematis. So this is a landscape rose, and this is called flower carpet white. And for those of you who aren't familiar with landscape roses are sort of, I guess, more like a ground cover rose. They grow very low and usually spread out pretty far, and you see them frequently maybe controlling embankments or in commercial applications outside shopping centers. And I think because of their easy care and their use in those applications, and the fact that they're not the big blousy romantic roses that we cut and stick our noses in and love, David Austin shrub roses, all that. They're not that. They're very simple, but they're very easy care, and I think they've gotten a bad rap. So I hope that by showing you a few of the ones that I grow in my garden today, that I'll convince you to think about landscape roses more as a very, very good doer and a really dependable, beautiful plant to have in your garden, and not so much as a rose. So don't think of this as like part of a rose garden, although it certainly could be, but they are just great, great plants. And I'm always astounded that people look down on plants that are just really good doers in the garden. So this flower carpet rose, these were bred by a breeder in Germany, I think, but they're marketed by a European nursery, and I'll link it below. And you can get them all over here in the United States, very easy to find. Flower carpet roses come in like 11 different colors, varieties I mean. So you have apricot, yellow, white, red, all sorts of colors, both single and semi-double flowers. So there's a lot of options and a lot of heights. And the great thing about landscape roses is their hardiness. So some of them, including the one I'm looking at across from me, have been noted to be hardy down to zone 3, which you won't see with a lot of other kinds of roses. And also their disease resistance. So this rose has extremely glossy foliage, and that's a real indicator of it being almost impervious to things like black spot. This one also doesn't get a lot of sawfly. There's very, very minimal damage on this, where there's a lot of sawfly damage on some of my other shrub roses. So here in the garden, I grow shrub roses, English roses, climbing roses, landscape roses. I grow all the kinds of roses, rugosa roses. I love them all. But I think that these have a very, very specific purpose. And where we are standing right now, we're right next to a walkway, pavers. And I have it cascading out in between two boxwood shrubs into the walkway. And this rose on the other side, the same. So these are fantastic candidates for anywhere where you have hardscape, where you have reflective heat, like a driveway or your walkways or embankments. Lots of areas that are tough to find plants to grow. They bloom and bloom. They're blooming machines. This started blooming a couple weeks ago, and now it's just going to keep blooming off and on all throughout the whole summer. It is got these sweet little white flowers on it, beautiful yellow, pale yellow buds that open into white flowers with yellow centers. Meticulous looking foliage, a plant that tolerates reflected heat, a plant that tolerates full sun. Just, again, a useful plant in the garden, even if you don't consider it a rose. So we're going to look at a few landscape roses today, ones that I love, ones that I use all the time, and then look at some other roses that are blooming in my garden. And in the garden, I also have a lot of areas where I use roses and clematis together, and we'll look at those. So we're gonna head off into the garden and see what we can find. Before we leave this area where I was just talking about flower carpet white rose, I did want to mention that this rose self-cleans, and that means that when it's done blooming, it sheds its petals on its own, and you don't have to come in and deadhead it because it just drops its petals on the ground. And I think it's a very romantic look near a walkway to see a bunch of petals. Hi, Georgia. So I'll turn around and I want to talk about the rose across the way that I was sort of mentioning when I was talking. But first I'm going to show you a rose that does not self-clean. And this is a Rosa rugosa, Rosaria de la Haye. And you can see that it does not shed its petals. It hangs on to them. And the reason that I don't clean this rose up is because it has beautiful, beautiful rose hips, and the birds love them and I love them. So that's what's going to happen next. This is going to get beautiful rose hips. This has been blooming for quite some time. And you can see the end of its flowers here. I do not want to knock this Rosa rugosa. This is Rosaria de la Haye. Rosa rugosa, Rosaria de la Haye. And this is one of, this is child's play to grow this plant. It blooms, you can see there's buds everywhere. This is another blooming machine, keeps going and going and going. Rugosas are completely immune to any sort of foliar disease. You can't even spray them, even if you wanted to, but they don't get black spot or any other powdery mildew, any of that. They do get sawfly. You can see there's a little bit of sawfly damage there, but not to the degree some of my other roses get it. Let me see if I can get that clearer. The sawfly damage, that little chewed part, they chew, the rose sawfly slugs or caterpillars chew from the back sides of the leaves. So when you start to see that damage, you can flip up the back side and often see the caterpillar there. But Rosa rugosa doesn't get sawfly, like I said, to the degree others do. But this Rosa rugosa, fantastic plant, highly recommend. Suckering rose, another good one for tough spots, but also amazingly fragrant. One of the most fragrant. I have this planted down front in my lilac hedge. So it's a suckering shrub and it comes up in between the lilacs and fragrances the whole sidewalk when you're walking by. This next little landscape rose is going to seem like a disappointment, I guess, right now until and I'm going to insert a picture so you can see what it looks like when it's in bloom. So this is Oh So Easy Fragrance Spreader, and it is at least 5 or 6 feet wide right now. And again, glossy foliage. This one is hardy down to zone 3 or 4, depending on which source you go by. Never gets any sort of foliage damage. And even though it's not blooming, it's about to. I'll show you. Every stem is loaded with buds. And this whole thing is just gonna erupt very soon. And I'll come in down here so you can see some that are more toward about where they're gonna open. And again, I'll put in pictures so you can see what this is gonna look like. A single pink rose, single flower. And this is just gonna be covered. And this is planted with a clematis called Star River. And Star River clematis is an integrifolia. It's an herbaceous clematis. It doesn't climb. It was bred for the cut flower industry. So it was bred to be cut. So it has long stems that don't twine onto anything, so you can cut them and put them in flower arrangements. It is a stunner. And it grows, it will bloom for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks on end. It will just keep reblooming. I never deadhead it or touch it. It just keeps blooming and blooming. And it's using this landscape rose, Oh So Easy Fragrance Spreader, as its support. So if you grew this without another plant next to it, you would have to either tie it up or put it in some sort of a trellis or cage. And you can see it there. There's a Rosa rugosa flower down in there. Beautiful, great combination. So, and I would say about 3 or 4 days, of course not while I'm filming, we're gonna have this rose covered. And again, I'll put in some pictures so you can see what it looks like when both of these are blooming together. And they are a spectacular combination. And they are growing, again, cascading over a walkway. I'll back up. You can also see Georgia. Hi, Georgia. So, also easy on the left and flower carpet on the right. And these are actually repeated. There's another oh so easy a little bit further down on the walkway and more flower carpet in between the boxwoods. Now we're on the sides of my front walkway. And this rose, this little single that is covered in bees at all times, is part of the Drift series, the people who brought you knockouts. And this little rose, it's so sweet. And this rose will bloom for maybe 2 or 3 weeks. And then I will come in and deadhead the whole thing. It doesn't clean itself as well as the flower carpet. And then it will bloom. And I'll do that, and I'll have 3 bloom times during the summer. So it will bloom, cut it back, bloom, cut it back, and then bloom again, usually finishing in October. And the last one is growing in quite a bit more shade. So the color is a little bit darker, and the plant is overall a little bit smaller. Well, we're stopping by yet another one that's not blooming yet, but you can see its flower buds on it. But what I want you to notice again is the super glossy. Look at how shiny that foliage is. So that tells you again that this rose is going to be just a rock star dealing with foliar diseases. Sorry if I just hit my mic. So I planted these last year in this back garden when I redid it. These are another oh so easy. This is called Ice Bay. And they got actually eaten down to tiny little nubs over the winter. Pardon my hose. There are 3 of them, and they rebounded quite well, and they're getting ready to bloom. Again, planted near the edge of the border because they're going to be low growing, blooming all summer, and don't mind the reflection of heat off rocks and walkways. So at the end of this, or in the show notes or whatever, the description box, I'm going to include links for where I buy my roses of all kinds. And I buy like what I would call shrub roses or David Austin roses and other different places than I buy my landscape roses. So I'll link everything. But I will tell you that most of my roses, my real roses, not my landscape roses, even though they're all real roses, that doesn't even make any sense. But anyway, that's how I'm going to differentiate them. Mostly come from heirloom roses. And the reason I order from them a lot, well, they have beautiful plants, but also they sell own root roses. So if you have bought roses in the past from a nursery or from even, a department, like a Walmart or a Home Depot or something, and then planted the rose, and say you bought like a yellow rose, and then the next year the rose comes up and it's blooming and it's red, and you think, how did that happen? I bought a yellow rose. Chances are very good that you bought a grafted rose. So a grafted rose is a rose that they took a stalk or a stem of the rose they wanted, and they graft it on to a very vigorous rose rootstock, usually Rosa Dr. Huey, most commonly used one. And then they can propagate roses very quickly and get a lot out into commerce. And the rose is very vigorous because the rootstock is vigorous. So 2 things can happen. First of all, if you live where it's cold, the graft can die from a hard winter, and then you'll just have the rootstock. And sometimes the rootstock, if it was planted incorrectly, will send up canes that overwhelm the grafted rose, and you'll end up with just what the rootstock rose was. So if you planted a rose of one color and now you have a rose that doesn't look like the rose you bought at all, chances are good that you bought a grafted rose. So I only buy roses that are growing on their own roots. And then if the rose doesn't make it, I don't have to deal with this. And I'll show you what I mean. This is a cane of rose that's coming from a rootstock of Dr. Huey. And I'm going to back out and show you. I'm standing right where the flower carpet is, and along this line of boxwood hedge. So all along this boxwood hedge, when I planted it, this is the back of my house, I put standard roses growing up in between the boxwood. So I keep the boxwood trimmed, so there's a little tiny opening in each one of them. And I had standard roses, which are roses that are growing on a long stem with just a clump of foliage and flowers at the top in a little ball, in case you don't know what a standard is. So I was put the standard roses here, and this is a long, long time ago. And the graft died, the standards died, and since then I've been digging out little canes of Dr. Huey. Now I thought it's hard to dig in here because of the boxwood roots and everything. So I would go in and think I got out all the Dr. Huey rootstock, only to find out the next year I got another one sprouting up. So I have to keep at it. So if you've had that happen to you, that's why I'm going to include again a picture of that rose so you can see if you have it growing in your yard, and then you'll notice it. It's funny, once you know these things, you'll be in someone's yard and you'll be like, "Yep, you had a grafted rose and it died, and now you have this rose." All right, let's walk around and see some beautiful things. This is clematis Elsa Spaeth. My goodness, one of the most beautiful, 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 big. When they open, they're very, very purple. Let me see if I can get one that's very, very purple. And they start to fade to more silvery purple as they age. This is a rebloomer, so it'll bloom now, and then it'll bloom again if I get around to pruning it. In this same garden is another clematis, and this one's called Polish Spirit, and this thing is a beast. The base of this is right underneath that ceramic bird house, and you can see that this is extending from one end of the garden, and sometimes I tie it up onto this fence, but this year I'm just letting it sort of romp through the garden. And this will bloom well into July, probably into August. Beautiful, beautiful clematis. I keep saying beautiful. Let's go look at one that I'm not going to use the word beautiful. Right, so this is Clematis viorna, and this is a little native clematis, and it has these adorable pink buds that open to these pitcher shaped flowers, and they are the sweetest little thing. This thing will bloom nonstop now. It's probably September when this thing stops blooming, and its seed heads are amazing. I want to show you how tiny these are. Teeny, teeny, tiny. So this thing will just keep pumping out flowers and then seed heads all summer long. It's actually growing marginally where it likes. It could probably use a little bit more shade, but it gets a pretty decent amount here. This is Aloha, which is just coming into bloom. And this is a very upright climber that gets about 6 or 8 feet tall. This is a good one if you have a small trellis or a small place to have a climbing rose. And these beautiful flowers are all just opening. And this rose has a light fragrance. And it's only been in the garden a couple of years, so it's only about maybe 3 feet tall now. And eventually this trellis is going to go over it. There's a clematis growing on there that it's protecting right now. So eventually these two will grow together, but right now the rose is pretty new. So end of the season, I'll move everything around and put them together. But for now, you can just enjoy the flowers that are starting to appear on Aloha. This is a little pretty little shrub rose called Quietness, just starting to come into bloom. Lightly fragrant, easy to take care of. You can see it got a little bit of soft light damage, but pretty mild, which is nice. It's growing next to my favorite David Austin rose, which is right here, that hasn't even started to come into bloom yet. And this is Sharif Asma, and there's not even any buds on here, but hopefully pretty soon. So I know you're looking at what might seem like another disappointing area of the garden, but I assure you it's not. So I am going to include some pictures of what this looks like when it's in its full glory. So where I'm standing next to is my rose arbor, and on this rose arbor is this Rambler rose that came from my grandmother's garden. I'm pretty sure it's Seven Sisters, and this thing is, when it's in bloom, it is jaw-dropping. My grandmother used to tell all of us stories all the time, and we only ever called this Grammy's rose. She used to grow this in her front yard, and she used to tell us stories how people in the supermarket would stop to tell her that they drove by her house and saw her beautiful rose. She just had it sprawling on her front lawn, not covered, not trellised up on anything, but just as a big sprawling mass, like Sleeping Beauty. This thing is viciously thorned. I took cuttings of it from her garden. So even though she's passed and that house is no longer in our family, I have this rose, and it's blooming on this trellis with a clematis called Haldine. And I will tell you that Haldine is a great clematis for use in planting with climbing or rambling roses, for the reason that Haldine holds its flowers very proud of the stems. So it's probably difficult to see from anywhere but close up, but when this is blooming, you actually see the flowers sort of distant from the rose because of the way that Clematis Haldine holds its flowers off the stem, the long stem length that it has on each individual flower. Haldine is classified as a type 3 pruning, I believe, so you cut it back to the ground. I don't have to cut it back because the rabbits do for me all the time. But this thing blooms so beautifully. It has gorgeous midribs on the back. It has a little mauvish tint. It's really, really pretty clematis, and goes, again, very, very well with bigger roses. I wouldn't plant this with something smaller because it will smother it. On the opposite side, from where I'm standing, there's also a clematis. That side of the arbor got girdled by roses. The roses got girdled by rabbits over the winter, so the whole thing had to be cut down. So it is going to bloom. There's buds all over it, but they're lower down to the ground. And there's a clematis on that side called Countess of Wessex. And Countess of Wessex is a gorgeous little clematis, but it is little. So it only grows about halfway up the arbor on that side, and it doesn't get the size of Haldine on this side that does on this side. But Haldine comes up over the top, so it sort of balances itself out in the end. So beautiful, beautiful combination to have these growing all together. And when this is all in full bloom, you just want to put a chair, and I have done this, put a chair over opposite it and just sit there and look at it, stare at it, how beautiful it is. I'm not going to recommend anybody to grow this rose. This rose gets black spot. This rose does not self-clean. So when the flowers are finished, and there are thousands and thousands and thousands of them, they have to be pruned off. And because it's so thorny, you have to wear rose gloves. Every time I have to deal with tying this rose in, I have to go find my leather rose gloves. So it's not the rose, but the clematis, Haldine, that I will tell you is a fantastic addition to your garden. Although if you want it, I mean, who's to say? You can choose to grow this rose if you want to. Every plant has its place. Rambling roses are not plants that are easy to manage in the garden, but I think they're beautiful. So anyway, that's Clematis Haldine, Clematis Countess of Wessex, and this rambling rose that I think is called Seven Sisters. This is a rose you might recognize, and this is a climbing New Dawn, and this is growing up a trellis that's attached to my front porch. And this is, I love the color. It's has a very lovely fragrance. I love it from bud all the way through every stage of flower opening. I think it's so pretty. And this is a rebloomer that will keep blooming I've cut roses off this in November. Worthy addition to any garden. That's why so many people know it and grow it, because it is a great garden doer. This rose and clematis pairing is in the front of my yard, and this bed right here, what you're looking at is lots of spirea with a suckering rugosa rose, Rosa alba, and I'll zoom in on some of the spots where you can see it best. That's been blooming for a couple of weeks. That's white. It's Rosa rugosa alba. And because it's suckering, it's coming up just wherever it wants to. And I'll kind of zoom in so you can see some of the ones that are in flower. And what makes it hard is that because some of it's past and it isn't in full bloom up front, you can't see all the white flowers. So a lot of them toward the back, and you can see how many flowers have already gone by. It's a tricky thing about doing garden videos because you miss the time when everything's at its peak. But anyway, this is clematis. I am Lady J. And this is a smaller clematis, still a pruning type 3 that you cut down to the ground, but not a very vigorous one. Maybe about to be 8 feet, or grows to be about 8 feet. These beautiful nodding bicolor purple and white, sometimes, as you can see, tinged with green flowers. And one of the things about clematis that you may or may not know is the smaller the flowers, the more profusely they flower. So you can see how many buds are still forming on this, and this thing just stays smothered for so long. So many flowers. Really, really sweet little clematis. I am Lady J. Growing here with spirea and Rosa rugosa alba. Shed. And this is Rosa glauca, which I talk about a lot. I love this plant. As a foliage plant, it's just spectacular. To me, the flowers are almost irrelevant. But this plant has two names, Rosa glauca, which it is officially called, and it used to be called Rosa rubrifolia. So I'm going to show you here in the shade the color, and you can see how blue it is. It is blue, blue, blue. Look at that foliage. It is such a pretty, pretty little foliage accent in this garden. And now we're going to walk over to where it's blooming in the full sun, and you'll see the difference. So this is Rosa glauca in the sunlight, and this rose gets full sun all day. There's no shade around here whatsoever, and this is very, very red. Its stems are red. Well, I'm saying red, but they're more of a mauve color. The stems are, they're the leaf veination in all of the leaves that get the sunlight. Near the base of the plant, they're more blue, but at the top, very, very red. Gorgeous, gorgeous foliage plant. This plant actually got quite leggy over the past few years. I am going to say, I should have mentioned, I'm working without a mic here, so it's a little windy. I hope that's not too annoying. The mics just wouldn't stay charged. I don't know what's going on. So anyway, this had gotten to be about 8 feet tall, and it was all leggy and a lot of foliage at the top, which actually looked nice because the peony in front of it usually blooms at the same time that this rose does, and the flower colors are exactly the same, so it actually looked quite nice. But I decided to cut the rose back and let it fill out from the base again. So I did that last August, and it's filled out beautifully. It's very, very happy and healthy. I'm not 100% certain we're going to get bloom on it this year, but that's okay. It hasn't bloomed yet, and usually it's already done blooming by now. Fantastic foliage plant. Can't gush about that one enough. It's planted in tandem in this garden with a clematis called Hagley Hybrid. And Hagley Hybrid is a smaller clematis, probably maxing out at maybe 6 to 8 feet. Great for smaller structures in your garden or areas where you don't have, big trellises or climbing into trees. Beautiful mauve colored flowers, beautiful on the back and on the front. Dark colored anthers, and all these colors pick up the foliage color of the Rosa glauca. And there are other things in this garden that also pick up the foliage color of that plant, which are this sedum October Daphne that has the red, both the the glaucous blue and the red edges. There's a big blue stem right at my feet that hasn't gotten tall enough for you to probably see it yet, but also has that reddish color in its leaves. And obviously the salvia picks up on it. Also over here is a tiny little Rosa glauca seedling. Because it's a species rose, it does seed and makes little true to species plants. So you can dig them out and give them to people, and or move them around in your own yard, not in a nuisance way, but just in a happy way. There's also some annuals in here that are going to bloom in this color that haven't started coming up yet. And one more rose in here that does not match in any way with this garden, but this rose in the front that's called All the Rage, that's an earth kind rose. And earth kind roses, it's a program out of Texas A&M where they test for disease resistance and vigorous shrubs, and to make rose growing a little bit easier, they can recommend roses for the average home gardener that doesn't want to use a lot of sprays and pesticides to control rose problems. So anyway, I planted that one, and when I first started learning and teaching about easy care roses, and I gotta tell you, I think the flowers are sweet. The bud color is so intense, and the flower when it opens is very attractive to bees because it's an open center, and I think they're very, they're just sweet. But I have not found the shrub to be all that vigorous. Every year I think I'm gonna move it and take it out of here because it certainly doesn't go with what's going on in here, but I kind of forget about it. It blooms off and on through the whole summer. So that's Rosa All the Rage, and Rosa glauca and clematis Hagley hybrid that's in this garden. This is clematis Ville de Leon, growing here in partially shaded area underneath the peach tree. It's got quite a few unopened flowers yet. Beautiful. The color on this one is always so saturated and gorgeous. I'm going to get some flower for at least another couple weeks. It's been flowering already for a couple of weeks, and it's growing. And if you can see the peaches. So I'm going to finish this video with this little area here. And this area used to have a great rose and clematis combination. That rose has been here for about 20 years. My mother gave it to me. I don't know its name. And it used to bloom in tandem with a Betty Corning, which is a beautiful clematis. And I'll include a picture of what it used to look like over here. And there used to be a different potting bench that was made of wood. So I had to take this whole area apart when we replaced our kitchen window, which is right above it. So this area had to be completely cut back. We had to cut back the azalea that's in the corner, cut back the rose, and I moved the clematis to another place in the garden. And that Betty Corning is very, very happy where it is. So I went around the garden and I found a clematis that was growing somewhere that was totally hidden and out of sight. Nobody ever saw it. And I moved it into this rose. So it's going to grow into this rose. And I just did that. It's only been in the ground for a little bit. And I'm going to try and train the rose. The problem I have with the rose, and I'm going to see what happens. So I just tied it so it's coming toward this baker's rack now. I think that reflects a lot of heat, and this rose doesn't like it. But when I've tied it there before, the long part of the cane that's attached to it isn't completely happy. But we're going to see what happens. So anyway, I'll put a picture in of what it used to look like and see what we're going for as we go forward with the new clematis that's in there, and I'll put a picture of the one that I planted in there and this rose, and see if we can get this area back to its former glory.